Welcome to another broadcast of the Debra Rufini Show on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. All past shows are archived. You can find them at ArtistFirst.com. And now, from England, here she is, your host, Debra Rufini.
Greetings from England. This is Debra Rufini with another edition of the Debra Rufini Show. We're doing things a little bit differently today. I am my own guest. My guest before last was the wonderful Christy Parker, who is a specialist in recognising and dealing with toxic people. She enlightened me so much on this horrible thing which so many of us are subject to, and without quite possibly realising it. When we're in a relationship with a, also known as a narcissist, we can sometimes just feel that something isn't right, without necessarily being able to put our finger on it. It leaves us, for the victims, should I say, it leaves us very confused and very baffled as to what's going on in their head, and it can bring up all sorts of emotions in us. We can believe that we're going insane. It's not a very pleasant experience at all. This is a subject very close to my heart, as I mentioned on the previous show. As I personally believe, I've had 3 encounters now with narcissists in my life. In the true sense of the word, sometimes we can say someone's a narcissist because we don't like something they did, or we just think they're maybe not too nice a person. But narcissism actually is a very real thing. It's a very horrible thing, and it's not something you really want to encounter if you can help it. We can't always help it. That's the problem. If we knew we would end up in this sort of situation, then we wouldn't go there in the first place. So I by no means expert in the field, but I've had to educate myself pretty quickly before I allow it to happen again, really. I'm in a support group where I recognise a huge amount of pain caused by this horrible, horrible thing. And I believe there are many undiagnosed sufferers. But once it has a name, it's now something real, and we can breathe a sort of sense of relief that we're not losing our sanity. And, you know, the brilliant thing about support groups is that we realise then that we're not on our own. And it's very helpful to share experiences that we can identify with. And oh my goodness, yeah, mine used to do that, and I thought it was just my ex or my family member, but it's interesting to hear that yours does too. You know, it's very encouraging. Sad to hear that other people have experienced the same people that we have, but at the same time encouraging. So let's take a little look at what narcissism is. Narcissism quite often comes from a broken place. There could be abuse in the house where they come from, causing childhood trauma. That can be a trigger for narcissism. There's a saying, isn't there, hurt people hurt people. When it doesn't manifest itself healthily, I think when there's hurt that has happened during impressionable years, if the person doesn't get help, then they can grow into adults that are very hurting people, and sadly that hurt can hit out at the rest of society. And of course it's very damaging when you get into a relationship with a narcissist who has not sought help, because you then have to kind of, I don't really like the word baggage of a partner, but you do literally have to, it's like looking after a toddler, really, you know. And I guess that makes sense if they haven't had a good start in life. you then can become, in a relationship, a close friendship relationship, you can become their carer, their mother, and quite often narcissists end up with empaths. So if you think about it, two narcissists together is not going to work, because they're just going to lock horns. It's not going to be good at all. It just wouldn't last. But a narcissist quite often attracts an empath, who is someone who is very loving, very caring, and want to fix them. And of course we can't fix people, because people need to first of all recognise that they need fixing themselves. Anyway, I'm wandering. I'm just it's because it's just me here, that's why I'm just chatting away. I've got no one else with me. So yeah, so let's take a look at what narcissism actually is then. Some of the traits. Yeah, a narcissist feels a kind of sense of entitlement. Everyone is beneath them, so to speak. Nothing is ever good enough for them, no one is ever good enough for them, and quite often they disregard people because, you know, they've got their own set of standards, they've got their own terms and conditions, how things must be done. And it's more than often it's one rule for them and another rule for you. And of course we can't comply to that, because for most people a relationship, friendship just goes along how it goes along. We shouldn't have, it's hard work, it's treading on eggshells if you've got to stick to their set of rules, and you're always going to go wrong, you're always going to screw up if you have that standard set for you. So another thing, so I'm laughing because so many of these things I identify with myself, and it's quite good to be doing this. It's kind of healthy for me, and I want it to help others, of course, but it's also quite difficult, because I'm going to be speaking through the three examples that have happened in my life. So yeah, a narcissist blames the other person for what they're guilty of a lot of the time. This is known as projection. So it could be something like, I don't know, a simple example, the narc has left something somewhere, and then they say to their partner, "Where did you put that?" And the partner's like, "Well, I thought it was on the mantelpiece." "No, it's not on there. Where did you put it?" They will often blame the innocent party for something they've either knowingly done, or sometimes they're just not aware that they're doing it, I believe. All this, by the way, is a mixture of my personal opinion, connected to my findings, and what I've read up on it. And like I say, I've had to educate myself quite quickly before I end up in a mental institution. They just cannot admit to being at fault. They are always right, and because of that, they seldom apologise. It's kind of bruising their ego to apologise. It's considered a sort of form of weakness, and I guess if they've come, that kind of makes sense. If they've come from broken homes, or broken start off in life, then I guess they've had to grow up strong and in control, and, you know, determined to not let anything affect them, which is healthy to a degree, but only to a degree. And also because of that, they will constantly, oh my Lord, I've had this. They will constantly find fault and be critical. If it's not one thing, it's something else. This thing isn't clean enough. If you dusted this week, yes, well, you've missed that bit. Oh, right, okay, well, I'll clean that bit then. But your fridge magnets are dirty. And honestly, and I'm hoping so many of you will recognise what I'm saying. Not that I want you to have gone through this, but it was so healthy to me to hear that this is not just me, it's so many other people have this. And again, it's not just relationships, it can be close friendships, it can be family members. Yeah, so they always criticise. One thing gets sorted, let's look at this, let's find fault in this now. You can never, ever be to their standard. Nothing's ever good enough. They can be doing 122 things wrong themselves, but they will zoom in on your 22. You know, they just will not look at anything that they're doing wrong. This is something that I've been guilty of due to the behaviour of the narcissist. They cause us to lie. And we may think to ourselves, oh, but there's no such thing as a white lie, you know, every lie is serious. Yeah, lies are serious. They're not morally okay. But they put us in this sort of catch-22 situation. It's very, very clever, deliberately done or not, where you will, how can I explain it? Because they've got their own set of standards, and if you don't abide by their rules, let's say in a relationship, they could finish with you if I don't want you seeing that family member. You know, so what do? You either see the family member and come back and get a beating for it if you're honest with them and tell them about it, or you just don't have contact with the family member, which of course is wrong. You shouldn't be controlled, providing it's a healthy relationship between you and the family member. Or the third alternative is to lie. And I found on a few occasions that for me has been the easiest option, is to lie, because it gives everyone, and there's a saying, isn't it, ignorance is bliss, but it gives everyone a sense of satisfaction, relief. But also they do an interesting thing connected to they will lie in the attempt to make us believe that we are going insane. This is a phenomenon known as gaslighting. It can be to justify their overreaction, because a narcissist, they know they've got problems. And so yeah, they can blame you for something that, well, either they're enhancing or something that just didn't happen, and which leaves us scratching our heads thinking, you know, did I do that? Did I do what I'm being accused of? And so they gaslight us, which gets us to believe that what they're saying is true, so that we still stay beneath them, controlled. They want us to believe that we're going mad and question our sanity. It's a very, very cruel thing they do there. And then, of course, they get angry when we don't believe their lies. When we see through what they're doing, they get angry. They do another thing known as love bombing. And this is an interesting thing. They will flatter you by compliments. You're beautiful. I long to be with you. You're the most wonderful thing that's ever happened to me. And they will want to be Prince or Princess Charming. So they'll be over the top with their charm. We'll go into their house and they'll be playing music by an artist that we like. They will make everything romantic for us. Yeah, they will take us on a nice trip. You've just got to mention that you like red velvet cake, and before you know it, they've bought the shop out of red velvet cake. You know, it's this sort of thing where they're over the... That in itself is lovely, but providing it's genuine. But when it's a case of love bombing, it's just an act. This person is just a good actor, actress. It's just all an act, it's not real. And the love bombing happens until something upsets them. And then, oh my goodness, don't we know it? Then we're punished by silent treatment, punished by a beating, physical beating, punished by other forms of mental abuse. And then we realise that person hasn't been nice. It's just been a drama. And then if you defend yourself, they play the victim. A narcissist, oh my goodness, they're always the victim. If you think about it though, if a love bomber is so dramatically over the top with their charm in the beginning, imagine their reaction when something upsets them, that the reaction is going to be equally, if not more, dramatic. Another very sad thing, narcissists can't ever love, they just love the way that we love them. Everything is about them. Unfortunately, they only have feelings for themselves. They're not empaths at all. They will seldom cry over someone else's pain, if at all. Yeah, they just only feel for themselves. And quite often, as I've noticed, I'm thinking of one particular narcissist from my life. The charities that were supported were animal charities, which was most interesting. The only charity that this person supported was supporting something of their own illness. They wouldn't have supported something connected to somebody else's illness. Everything is about them. I remember on one particular occasion with this particular person that I had a go at. I had taken a verbal beating while they were desperately trying to rescue a fly, because a blue bottle isn't going to survive long in a closed room. So there was all this sympathy over this fly. And I've always said that if I'd been a cat with 3 legs, then this person would have loved me. But as it was, I was just a human, so, you know, so I didn't amount to much. So yeah, so where were we? I'm losing myself here. So yeah, they will seldomly will they cry over someone else's pain. And I guess the important thing is, once you comprehend that they only have feelings for their own emotions and that they are never at fault in their eyes, it answers a multitude of questions over our confusion and frustration of the behaviour. I would like to give 3 scenarios of narcissistic behaviour. This is going to be very, very difficult. Emotionally, it's going to be difficult for me. I'm going to have to try and keep it together, because these 3 particular people did harm me in such a massive way. And I just thank God now that I know the traits of narcissism. I would never, ever go there again with a partner, friend, even family member. Yep, I would go that far. You've got to look after yourself. You've got to protect yourself. And this is why I'm doing this show on this particular subject, because I think there's so many people, well, I would say probably most people have encountered a narcissist or more in their lives at any given point. But we are just left feeling, like I say, that, oh, something just isn't quite right. Oh, I feel uncomfortable about this. What was wrong with me? That's another thing, they leave us feeling, what's wrong with me? Because they've said I'm at fault, I'm the problem, it's all my fault, you know? So I'm going to have to be very, very careful for my own emotional well-being. And also, it's not that I wish to badmouth anyone who has been a big part of my life. And sometimes the same people can also be a blessing as well as a curse, because, you know, no person is all bad and no person is all good. We're a mixture of things, but sadly with narcissists, they have deeper rooted problems that have not been healed. So they can also be, and I'm thinking of these particular people, what were at the time massive blessing to me. And that's what we see in the beginning, otherwise we wouldn't get involved with them in the first place, right? So no one person is all bad. For anonymity, I will initial them. So these people will be, person number 1 will be P, person number 2 will be C, and person number 3 will be J. Okay, so, excuse me. P was a Christian friend of mine who was a blessing to many. I'm going to try to be as decent and as respectful as I can be, given the hurtful situation and unfair situations involved. So yeah, P owned a Christian bookshop, a Bible bookshop. P had a name for being a bit bossy, should we say. And we can kind of just accept that someone's a bit of a bossy know-it-all, and that's just how they are. Letting them off the hook, really, without thinking anything more to it, without thinking there's anything drastically wrong. But now this happened a few years ago, so you're going to have to bear with me. Yeah, I've got to try and remember as many details as possible because I've had 2 narcs since. So, but P was my first true narcissist. My weakness was constantly being pointed out to me. But P had many weaknesses herself. We're talking about spiritual weaknesses. So P saw themselves in a position of authority, wanted to be bigger than everyone else, was more spiritual than everyone else. P considered themselves as more spiritual than most people. And so quite often narcissists, they're not just these mean, nasty people. Quite often they can be, again, love bombing. And in this situation, this person was not a partner, but an absolute love bomber, with compliments, flattery, telling people how wonderful they are, but could not take criticism. And that is the big problem with narcissists. They cannot take the criticism themselves. And as much as P was giving out the compliments, P was also delighting in bringing people down and criticising them. Largely because of another classic case of a broken home. This person was in, not having a good start in life, so everyone else had to suffer the consequences when this person should have sought deep, intense therapy. So, so yes, I attended, it was a ladies' Bible study held in P's Bible bookshop. At the time, yes, I did have a weakness, and it was a weakness regarding something that wouldn't have been pleasing to the Lord. We're not talking about anything like infidelity or I wasn't abusing anyone. It was a weakness that I personally had that wasn't hurting anyone else, but it was something that wasn't right in my life, should we say. And at this particular meeting, I was invited by P to make an announcement in front of the ladies there, and some of them I'd known from ever since I was like 4 years old, which was a bit embarrassing. You know, I didn't want to, you know, do my dirty washing in front of people that I went back years with, and another lady from my old church, people that I knew, you know, quite well, that didn't know this part about me. And so yeah, it was kind of, Debra's got an announcement. Oh, have I? Do I need to make an announcement? What is this then? But I knew what P was referring to, because you know, it was an obvious thing that I'd spoken to her. And that's another thing. Yes, you don't ever break confidentiality with a narcissist, because it will come out. They will, when something's upset them, things will come out. That's another thing to bear in mind. So I had to, and person that I was at the time, I was a bit weak, I was very placid, I would just do anything that was told or asked of me. Not a good person for a narcissist to know, but Christmas Day for a narcissist on their part. So yeah, so I ridiculously, oh okay then P, I'll stand up, and I actually, a bit like as if it was Alcoholics Anonymous, you know, getting up, my name's Debra, I'm an alcoholic. It wasn't alcoholism, by the way, but this was expected of me, you know, and P was just looking at me as much to say, there you go, see, I got her to do it, and one of the ladies, bless her, someone who I knew from my last church, said, I don't feel this is right, because we're all sinners here. And yeah, and that was lovely. I was very moved by that, because this person was bitching about customers that would come into her shop, committing their own sins, you know, talking about certain things that other people were doing, while P, you know, was doing some pretty not very nice things herself. But mine was the biggest. Mine was the biggest thing that needed to be correcting. P didn't need looking at all. She didn't need help. And there was no apology. I never received an apology from P. The only thing P said to a friend, a mutual friend, was, I've apologised to my saviour, I don't need to apologise to Debra. And this beloved friend of mine said, if you haven't apologised to your sister in Christ, then you haven't apologised to your saviour. But yeah, so that was the first one, and I never. This was years ago, and I never since got an apology from P. But that's okay, you know. I will try and be the bigger person, and forgiveness as well. Forgiving someone that has never apologised, that's a big thing. That's a big thing to do. So yeah, so that was a narcissist number 2, who we shall call C. This was a relationship, and I will warn people about, it's not just people we meet from dating sites. It can be, it just happens to be people that are on dating sites, but it can be anyone that we meet. It's not that narcissists use dating sites. So yeah, I met C, and again, there can be early symptoms where we just think, just feels a bit odd, this doesn't feel right somehow. Yeah, but anyway, I'll let it go until something bigger happens to confirm the symptom, and then you get bigger and bigger symptoms and you think, this isn't my feelings about it now, this is evidence that the person is thoroughly narcissistic. So C met me, and I was the wrong skin colour. So I promise you, I'm not making this stuff up, you couldn't make this stuff up. So I had 2 bottles of L'Oreal skin colourant shoved in my hands to bronze myself up. I'm as pale as anything, as you can see by my the picture on my homepage. I may have to change it and put a brown one on there, because I was the wrong colour, so I was too pale. And C did not like white skin. She believed brown skin was natural. Any skin tone is natural. All beautiful. But there was no remorse in meeting someone for a relationship and trying to get them to change the colour of their skin. Now that's quite a serious thing if you think about it. Most people would, oh no, you know, everyone that I've told, mentioned this to, that's like, oh, that's horrible. How did that make you feel? Rubbish. I'd never looked at my skin before. I'd never felt that my pale skin had been unattractive until P had informed me it was. And it was treated very much as if it was just a completely acceptable comment because, well, I don't like white skin, so can you put this stuff on you to make you brown, please? Thank you. But the reason for this was to make me look like an ex-partner of C's. And, you know, sometimes with narcissistic behaviour you think, have I actually heard right? Is this, you know, is this really happening? Again, questioning your sanity. It's not just the gaslighting, it's you do question your sanity. There was an occasion where, and I realise I'm spending too long I've spent too long on one person, so I'm going to go through the next 2 quite quicker than I had planned. So just some examples of going back to the traits of narcissism that I've mentioned. It was summertime when I'd met C, and the lawn needed mowing. Now, I've never mown a lawn in my life because my garden, without giving too much detail about my garden, is a bit of a jungle, but I've never needed to mow a lawn. And anything you haven't done before, you don't know how to do it, right? But also, freshly cut grass, I suffer quite badly with hay fever, especially over freshly cut grass. So this would have made me feel really ill and come out in a rash, and I didn't have the medication on me when I stayed at C's house. So, and also the gardener, C had a gardener, was coming the following weekend. Grass isn't going to grow 2 foot tall in the span of, what, 6 or 7 days. So I said, oh, but, you know, I'm going to be quite ill and I'm not near home, because it was a long distance relationship. And so do you mind if we, you know, your gardener's going to come next week. So C then looked me deep in the eyes and told me that I was useless. And it wasn't just kind of, oh, you're useless, aren't you? You've never mown a lawn. No, this was a deep, you really are a piece of rubbish. You are useless, look. So I run upstairs, crying. 2 hours later, C comes up, no remorse, no apology, but just... Now, if I was upset, do you know what I would do? I would come up here and I would start doing something practical. Right. There was no consoling, no apology, nothing. And that made me feel worse, that on top of C making me feel rubbish, I was told that I should be doing something practical rather than lay there and cry. And I felt like saying, well, if you'd left a couple of pots of paint up here, I'd you know, paint your bedroom. I would have had it done by the time you'd, you know, but I would have done that wrong. You know, you can't do anything right by then. Just some examples. There was a shrew in C's house, and trying to catch a shrew was quite difficult. The shrew steered her way, and yeah, it was impossible. It was too quick. It couldn't have been caught. And so I took the blame. So the shrew steers the other way, heading towards C, but I took the blame that we couldn't catch it. Again, the narcissist cannot be wrong. Never at fault. There was an occasion where we had bought a sandwich between us for lunch, and it was okay for C to eat it in the car, but while I took the trolley back, it was pouring with rain. I get into the car. No, you can't eat that sandwich in here because there may be crumbs. Right. So again, one rule for the narcissist, another rule for the other person. So it was okay for C to eat the sandwich, but not for Debra to eat the sandwich because Debra may have left crumbs. There was an occasion where I hadn't followed the instructions of C's to load her dishwasher. So I needed punishment. I tried to follow the instructions, but there was a little cleaning capsule that had to be put in. Again, I wash up by hand. I don't wash the dishes by machine. So again, anything you've never done before, we don't know how to do it. So yeah, so what happened then was C stormed off because I had overlooked the capsule that had to go in. Stormed off into the garden. I go in typical empath fashion, "Are you okay?" So there's me running after C, "Are you okay?" And C takes hold of my hand and starts pushing my cuticles back in quite an aggressive fashion. Because I had not followed C's instruction, I deserved to be punished. There was another occasion that springs to mind, and I'm just using these to give examples of narcissistic traits. So my dad was very, very ill around New Year's Eve a few years ago, and there was a situation where he was supposed to be bringing a box of gifts to my house while I was away at C's house, and he didn't because he was very ill. It wasn't just flu. There was, you know, he was fighting for his life at the time. There were breathing complications, and there was a particular gift that when we came home to my place, C wanted this gift that wasn't at my house. So I said, "I'm sorry about that, but my dad is very, very ill. He couldn't come round to bring this." And the response, "I don't care. I don't care." My dad was at death's door, and the response was, "I don't care." It was all about wanting this gift, not about my dad could have died. I stormed upstairs, received a text from C saying, "Baby, can you come down, because I need a hug." Isn't that interesting? It was C that needed the hug. It was C that said, "I don't care about your dad being ill," which is naturally going to upset the person whose father is ill. But C was the one that needed the hug. That's a very narcissistic thing. And then knowing how upset I was because we didn't know whether my dad was going to make it or not. Yeah, knowing how upset I was, I cried and bawled, and I wanted to cry as much as possible. C's arms were put around me, and uttering the words, "Don't cry, come on, for me. Stop crying. There's a good girl. Stop crying for me. Stop crying for me." Not cry all you like, because we don't know whether your dad's going to make it or not. But the words were, "Don't cry for me." And that's kind of interesting, because the narcissist can barely show emotion because it's a sign of weakness. And so I guess if someone else shows emotion, their response, again, because they're not empaths, they can't empathise, their response is to say, "Shh, shh, 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 come on, stop. It makes me feel easier. I feel easier if you will stop crying. That's what this is about. I will feel easier if you will stop crying." So that was C, and we're on the third person, who should be known as J. Whoa, love bombing, that was a big one. That was the beginnings of this, the big love bombing. Taking me lovely places, paying me lovely compliments. Again, I had a gut instinct that something was very, very wrong. There were things. There were signs of control. We would be talking on Skype very late at night for a few hours, where Jay would begin the conversation, and 2 hours later we'd be talking about the same conversation. That's what a discussion is. And then Jay would say, "Oh, we've got to stop having these conversations late at night. You've got to stop doing this. Sorry, I've got to stop doing..." But Jay was the one that started the conversations, and then it would be my fault that we'd be having the conversation 2 hours later. And there was no responsibility taken. Again, with that, it was all my fault. Jay would always, like C, be looking for things to criticise. One thing, again, would be sorted out, and then there'd be something else to be moaned about. And it would usually be trivial things. The thing, this is the most interesting thing, and this is what I'm going to really elaborate on here, because this was the defining moment that I truly understood what narcissism was. And I'm aware that time's getting on, so I'm going to have to kind of go through this quite quicker than I would have done. We were at a party for a friend of mine, a 52nd birthday party, and Jay was an absolute love bomber. This was a person too good to be true, love bomber. Seemed genuine. There's no reason to think otherwise if you're being showered with compliments. So we went to this party, and I was sat next to, and it was a busy house party. I was sat next to a young lad, young enough to be my son, pleasant young man, who, on a two-seater settee, who was talking about his bipolar. Now, I'm fascinated and interested in anything connected to mental health. And this young gentleman, as he was talking to me, as many people with mental health issues, they they can be quite starey and affectionate. Now this young man there was nothing inappropriate, there was nothing creepy, but you could see that perhaps he had a mental health issue. While he was talking to me, he was making brief touches on my arm, shoulder and possibly back. Now when I'm saying this, even now, I don't know if this is what I've been told by Jay or whether this is my memory, because that's what the narcissist does. The gaslighting. But I do think that there were kind of brief touches from him, innocent, in non-sexual places, parts of my body. Jay hit the roof. I allowed a man to inappropriately touch me for 2 hours, and my crime was that I did not get up out of my seat and sit next to Jay. Now, this, for a start, did not take place. This person hadn't arrived. This chap hadn't arrived in time for this to take place for 2 hours. So the 2 hours was set out of anger, out of gaslighting me, to make me feel bad. Jay used terms as these disgusting acts that took place between us when there was nothing going on. It was just this man not making any suggestive sexual talk to me whatsoever, talking about his bipolar. That's all it was. And this is what the narcissist gets you to do. Spend the following weekend, this is what happened with me, getting in touch with strangers, complete strangers, via my friend whose party it was, birthday party, to ask if they saw anything inappropriate, and no one did. Because the narcissist is so good at making you feel so bad, you end up feeling guilty, wondering if, and I've never cheated or flirted or had an affair in my life. So I was made to feel like I'd had an affair. I was made to feel dirty. So nothing that I said was listened to. Anything that I said was not valid. My words were not trusted by Jay, but I didn't know what Jay was talking about. Now, when someone apologises, even if they don't know what they're supposed to have done that's wrong, the person does not then carry on attacking you. That is completely inappropriate. To carry on attacking someone when someone's apologised, that's not normal. That is completely narcissistic behaviour. Jay stormed out from my house the following morning. I've been disrespected. I cannot have association with a woman who allows a man to inappropriately touch her. And that was what happened there. I was naturally hurting over losing Jay, but also hurting, this is the most interesting thing, I was also hurting that Jay had been hurt, because I'm an empath, and I was hurting over my partner being hurt. But because narcissists are not empaths, they only feel for their own emotions. They only feel for their pride. Their ego must constantly be fed. The root of this problem is that this young man was talking to me and Jay wasn't involved in the conversation. So Jay made up this big pantomime about this man touching me, making out that I was bad, all because they saw something they didn't like. That in a nutshell, Jay just saw something that was not pleasing to the eye, because it did not involve Jay being involved. And so it got from bad to worse. And this is the danger with the narcissist. If you don't nip it in the bud, their behaviour can get from bad to worse. In the accusations, the accusations became worse. The stories were getting bigger. Contradictions, like one long email I had, for example. It started by this man tapping you on the knee, and then by the end of the email it said, if this man tapped you on the knee, this I did not see. So it was full of inconsistencies like that. So that leaves, as soon as someone starts lying, gaslighting, you can't believe anything else they say, because it makes the whole thing invalid now. So with all three people, P, C and J, they couldn't stand corrected in anything. You could not give them any information they didn't already know. Even trying to explain something that you knew about that they didn't, it's just not accepted. And also you can, this is what I found, you can go from one narcissistic relationship to another thinking this next one is healthy, simply because it doesn't have the same or many of the same traits as the last one. And that can be quite misleading. It's not until you get into the next one you think, here we go again, you know. And so the connection with all three of these individuals is, sadly, they all came from broken beginnings. But in different ways. They all had different sob stories, if you like, that would affect anyone. And so, you know, they all have my utmost sympathy with that. But the key is to get help if you're a broken person. The vicious circle with that is that the chances of them getting help, it really is a vicious circle, because in order to receive help, you must initially recognise that there is something that needs fixing. There is a deep hurt within the heart. But it's tragic, because the narcissist, they don't need fixing in their own eyes. You know, it's very sad. And it's frustrating and tricky for the receivers of the behaviour, because a lot of narcissists would actually be such beautiful, beautiful people. I mean, imagine if the love bombing was real. If the love bombing was real, the person would be sincere, because that genuine behaviour that actually is in the form of love bombing makes a really decent person. But sadly, with the narcissist, everything is conditional. The love bombing is just an act. It's not a real thing, because something comes along to upset them and poof, it's gone. So yeah, so in order for them to get help, they must first acknowledge that something needs fixing in their own eyes, and it does leave it very frustrating and tricky for the receivers of the behaviour. Again, I really wanted to talk through narcissism, because it affects so many people. And I don't think an awful lot of people are aware of what narcissism really is. So we can be subject to it and just feel worse and worse about ourselves, and keep keep glorifying the narcissist because, well, they must be right because I look up to them, and quite, you know, quite often narcissists are people in good positions, powerful positions that we look up to, so therefore they must be right and I must be beneath them because they're saying so. But we must protect ourselves, we must protect our mental health, which can in turn affect our physical health, as Christy Parker was saying on the show before last. You know, in my case, I always had chest tightness prior to visiting C in particular. It was a long journey. And I always had to take, I'm not playing with you here, I always had to take a diazepam, knowing that that was the most difficult relationship I had, the one with C, for all sorts of reasons. It was the most longer term relationship I had with a narcissist, but just knowing that I would do this nice relaxing train journey, and at the end of it, within 5 or 10 minutes, I would be criticised, and again, if I went up there, I wasn't brown enough. You know, things like that can make you just feel so rubbish. So yeah, my message really is to just please look after yourselves, or get out if you can. Your narcissist partner, this is an awful thing to hear, but your narcissist partner will not look after you, that's for sure. Everything, I'm sorry I've said it more than enough times, but everything really is about them. They do not love you. They only love the way that we love them, and that's an awful thing to learn, but it's absolutely true. Once we learn that everything's about them and that they are never wrong and that they just love the praise and love the way that they are loved by us, like I say, it covers a multitude of things and answers so many questions. Once we get our heads around that, which is hard, it covers so many things, answers so many things. So seek support. If they can't seek support, which is not likely they will, you get support, you seek support. Speak to anyone that will help. There are good organisations out there for victims of narcissism. And I would like to say thanks for tuning in. And please, please stay safe, because these people are so dangerous. They ruin us mentally, physically, emotionally. And please just look after yourselves. Okay, thanks again for tuning in, and until next time, big love and God bless.